Welcome to Reuters Events Pharma USA 2026. Well, with me today, I'm lucky to have Dr. Osama Hashmi, who is the Chief Executive and Co-Founder of Impiricus. Impiricus is ranked the fastest growing company in North America by Deloitte, so that's quite a fact to get us started. Let's just talk about what your prime mission is all about, which is the HCP overload problem. We could start with that perhaps. You've noted that physicians can have 100 people who really care and come at them simultaneously with very different messages. From your side, what do you think the industry fundamentally misunderstands about how physicians actually want to engage?
Yeah, for sure. So nice to meet you. And kind of from my perspective as a dermatologist, it's very different kind of as we're crossing the industry and talking with the pharmaceutical companies. When I'm in clinic, I'm seeing, 40, 60 patients a day, all with different diagnoses, all with different medications they can be on, all with a wide array of different resources that can be provided to them. And when I talk with the pharmaceutical companies that we work with, they're very focused on, this is the individual diagnosis, this is the individual resource, this is the individual patient that we're looking at. What ends up happening is there's this kind of many-to-many problem where you have all these different companies trying to reach physicians in all these different ways, and all these different physicians like myself who are seeing lots of different ways that people are trying to interact with us, whether it's I'm scrolling on Instagram and I'm seeing an ad to a rep is coming into our office or an MSL is available. There's a huge kind of overload problem around where's the single stop for me to really understand something about what's going to be valuable for my patients. So when I think about this problem today, it's this problem where there's a lot of resources, right, on the pharma side, lots of money being spent trying to reach doctors, but not a lot of money spent thinking about the unification of that experience, right? How do we create a single point where the physician can enter and access everything they need versus the multiple points that exist today?
But trust is a big thing here. I mean, trust between physicians and the pharmaceutical industry is notoriously tricky.
Yep.
Why has that happened and what can we do to fix it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, unfortunately, it's one of those things where back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were a couple of bad apples that I think really hurt the trust between the physicians and the pharmaceutical industry. We have things going on like the opioid epidemic, and there's various things that have come up where bad apples, unfortunately, have had outside influence in terms of that relationship. And so physicians, our organizations, our patients have all been naturally wary around that relationship. What I do think is that there's a new paradigm being created. I think that the wave of distrust that has come is now kind of leveling off, and now there's opportunities where pharma can engage in the right way with doctors to rebuild that trust.
Now, let's talk about the AI piece here. You've been described, or Impiricus has been described as an AI-powered HCP engagement engine, which sounds fantastic, but in an industry that's full of agentic hype, can you just tell us what the specific mechanism is that your AI uses at Impiricus and what that actually does to reduce latency in HCP engagement?
For sure. So it's a couple of different pieces put together. And to that point that I brought up earlier, from a first principles approach, we really think about unifying experiences for physicians, being a single front door that they can use to access multiple things from a pharmaceutical company, depending on the various channels that they might be engaging with. So what that means is that really understanding physicians on an N of one basis. As a dermatologist, I actually practice differently than other dermatologists in my exact same practice. I see different patients. I approach patients differently. There's different needs that I feel like I have for my patients. And so that understanding of physicians is really important. And the second is that feedback coming back in terms of how is a doctor engaging, what resources are valuable to them, being able to integrate deeply within the pharmaceutical companies and provide that feedback in terms of what they can be building, what they can be better supporting and integrating. That unification is really important. I think that's what we do that's different.
Now, Impiricus has built one of the largest trusted physician communities in healthcare. Why do you think peer relationships and trusted clinical networks so important for how physicians evaluate new therapies?
For sure. So as a physician who's kind of gone through residency and is in clinical practice, I will tell you that the world of being a doctor is very different than what you would see on TV or what you would even read about. An average physician is now balancing multiple different patients in clinic. There's phone calls coming in. There's a patient showing up with a ChatGPT report in terms of telling me what I should be doing, or MA just, called in sick. So the time constraints for a physician are really, really tight. And so it's really important for physicians and for pharmaceutical companies to better understand what physicians actually need at that point of time, right? That type of data and that type of interface for physicians is becoming more and more important. And so from our perspective, what can we do to serve the physician? What can we do that doesn't overload them? That's kind of a new dynamic that we're trying to create in this industry.
So a lot of pharma's outreach is incredibly narrow. It focuses on a highly targeted set of physicians. What are they missing out on? I mean, when there are other opportunities that they're simply not being able to tap into?
Yeah, for sure. So, in the 90s and the 2000s, the general healthcare was provided by a medical doctor who went to medical school, had easy access to pharma. There was a limited set of diagnoses, a limited set of treatment options, and it was pretty cut and dry. Today, everything has really expanded. You have nurses and physician assistants who are now providing medical care. You have patients who are coming in, like I said, with AI answers, trying to get information in terms of how they want their doctor to treat them. And then you have physicians who are less and less independent and more employed, more and more run by either algorithms that they see on their EMR or formularies that are set by their IDN. And so the dynamic has changed vastly. What's important is to note that oftentimes when pharma is targeting physicians, they're targeting physicians that they view as super high value, but they're missing a lot of opportunity in terms of physicians who might be seeing patients or might be open to education or might be open to molding their practice in a certain way if they were given the right education. The approach is less so, how can we deliver more lunches, but more so, how can we support these physicians in this changing environment to better serve their patients?
Now, if you were advising a brand team who are 6 months out of a dermatology or an oncology launch, what would be the 2 or 3 actionable steps that they put in right now to make sure they don't burn out?
Yeah, for sure. The biggest thing to think about is what is your message from a simple one-line perspective to that physician? When I think about the drugs that I'm prescribing, when I think about the patients that I'm seeing, I'm thinking about them in very, very simple ways, given the complex information that's available. So what is that one-liner that really differentiates yourself in the market? So that's the first thing. Do you have that one-liner set? And it's probably not your logo. It's probably not something that's going to be on, mechanism of action. It's going to be something that's very specific to the patients that I'm seeing and how it's going to make their lives better. The second thing is really thinking about the long tail opportunity, right? Everyone's reaching those high value physicians, those physicians who own large practices that are high prescribers of medicines. But I do think that there's a increased focus right now and an opportunity to reach physicians who may be, in a rural area, seeing things outside of what they learned from medical training. They might be physicians who are outside of the normal scope of the normal patient they see, but they want to become an expert in a new area. Those opportunities are where I think pharma can actually be a positive influence in terms of education, providing resources, support, and more importantly, getting more therapy to the hands of patients who need it.
Now, if in the next 2 years the industry gets physician engagement right, what's daily practice going to look like that's different for doctors in their everyday work?
Yeah, for sure. So the biggest thing for us is thinking about pharma as a partner versus an interruption. Right now, a lot of the ecosystem is kind of centered around a more is more approach. How can we get more impressions in front of a doctor? How can we get more messages to them? How can we really kind of overload them with our medical teams, commercial teams, everything coming at them? What I think would be different if we're successful 2 years from now, physicians will have less interactions overall, but a lot more impactful interactions that are centered around patients, centered around resources that can be helpful for their practice, and centered around kind of partnering towards better care versus overloading with impressions or just more messages.
Fantastic. Dr. Osama Hashmi at Impiricus, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been really interesting.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.